right. Hello, everyone. I don't think we've come up on, here we are. Hello, everyone. This is Stephanie Wilson with Freedom Over Fascism Live. And today I am talking to Anat Shenker-Osorio, whom most of you probably know of or know. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So first, an introduction. Anat Shenker-Osorio is an American political strategist and messaging consultant. She's the principal and founder of ASO Communications, author of Don't Buy It, The Trouble with Talking Nonsense About the Economy, and the host of Words to Win By podcast. And I think she is a genius. So starting with that, let's see. I can't see the. Okay, bear with me, folks. I can't see the Substack. Oh, we are live on Substack. Okay, so now I can see the chat, and. I apologize. This is always a little bit iffy at the beginning. So today, obviously, is every day has some shocking or horrifying news. Today, we're in this dangerous moment where yesterday an ICE agent, we assume, executed a woman in Minneapolis, Renee Good. And we saw the shooting from a number of angles with our own eyes. And yet, the right is coming out with their talking points ready to go about how she essentially deserved this. It was a tragedy of her own making, says J.D. Vance. And in addition, we have a recent invasion of Venezuela. We have plans to invade Greenland and blow up NATO, and thus possibly precipitate World War III, and the constant drumbeat of ICE kidnapping people off of the streets. I think this is an inflection point because I think that this is the first white citizen woman that they've killed. But I want to talk about why seems pretty obvious, but the fact that they have a story ready to go. Everyone's on the same page on the MAGA, right? And how we get caught on the back foot every time something happens, even though it was predictable. And then we don't have a coordinated message. So
that's
thoughts?
That's the kicking it over.
Yeah, kicking it over.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me. It's lovely to see you again, and thanks, folks, for joining. I promise I will answer your question, but it isn't possible for me to start without just acknowledging just how much pain, how much unrelenting pain and sorrow all of us are in, and in particular, right now, I'm thinking of folks from Venezuela in the diaspora, in Venezuela itself. I'm thinking, of course, of all of my extraordinary friends and colleagues in Minnesota and in Minneapolis in particular. It feels pretty, I'll just be honest, stupid to be like offering talking points in response to fascism, but I'm in the research, understanding, persuasion, talking points business. And so that's what I got. If I had something stronger or better, I guess it's always 5 o'clock somewhere. I would offer that. That was an attempt at levity for those who couldn't catch it. But I just really want to say, and I will come to your question. I do promise that having worked in Minnesota for a long time and having spent the last couple of days on the phone and on Zooms and writing up talking points and trying to do whatever I can from afar and very much not bearing the brunt directly of the trauma in the ways that they are, just watching them. And by them, I mean the Immigrant Defense Network, I mean Copal, I mean Unidos Minnesota, I mean Take Action Minnesota, Faith in Minnesota. They have a giant 80 group democracy defense table. They have an immigrant defense table. They are organized. They are accustomed to working in solidarity. They understand everything about claiming the moral high ground. They understand everything about what it is to make a way out of no way at all. This occurred, as I think many of you would know, less than a mile away from where George Floyd was murdered. This isn't far from where Melissa Hortman was assassinated. And here, time after time after time, both in those, deadly assaults and just the ongoing assault of the propaganda about Minnesota and the cities and the propaganda about their leaders, here they are, very much like the bullion cube essence of all of the evil and the badness, at least for right now, which isn't to discount or say there aren't evil and horrible things being done to people across these United States. I'm just particularly attuned to Minnesota because I just know them well. So I just want to acknowledge their bravery and their heroism and their moral fortitude and their solidarity. And yeah, it just feels really important to say that. To your question, which hopefully I still remember. So yes, the right always has their story ready to go, packaged, produced on the state-owned media that they have through, every single level. They deliver it on a dime. And the reason for that is because they only have one story. The story, much like Superman comic book of old or a franchise superhero movie, it has to change from chapter to chapter to chapter. Otherwise, people wouldn't keep buying new magazines or going to see the Avengers again and again and again. But it's the same story. And it's not only the same story here in the US, it's the same story in Hungary. It's the same story in Turkey. It's the same story with some permutations when Bolsonaro was in power in Brazil. It's the same story that just happened. I was in Sydney during the Bondi massacre. It's the fallout, the far right attempting to claim that story as well. And because they have one singular story, which I suspect everyone on this live knows well, which is basically, do you know why your life sucks? It's because of those people. And those people can take different forms and shapes, and they do in different places, but it's still the same story. They're readily able to produce talking points, and they're readily able to produce discourse because they don't have to come up with what to say. And what happens with us is that we are constantly responding to each thing as if it were different, not just in category, but kind, not just in specific details of the date and the name and the place and exactly what transpired, but as if we don't fundamentally know, which we do, what is precisely going on here. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, and I work and speak frequently with a colleague named Mike Podhorzer, who has a Substack called Weekend Readings, and
he's been on here, so go find him.
Yeah,
you talked to him yesterday. I didn't
talk to him yesterday. He has a piece coming out that's really, really, really important, and basically what his piece is saying, and I feel like I'm allowed to steal his thunder because he stole his own thunder talking about it yesterday, otherwise I wouldn't do that to an author, just to be clear, is that, and these are my own summary words on it, we keep pretending that we have a cold, that each one of these is like an independent virus, when in fact we have cancer. And when I say we keep pretending, and Mike is going to talk about this in the piece, I mean from back in the day, like not just starting in January of 2025, not just starting in wherever of 2016, but starting in all of the ways that we have refused to actually confront and engage what is before us. And the point that Mike makes is taking us way back to the failure to demand any kind of accountability for the Iraq War, for the lies in the lead up, for the torture, for the way that the war was fed and sped and propagandized to us, and then the way that it was actually conducted. And the same goes for the global financial crisis, that not only did we sort of not admit who was behind it and why, they were never made to suffer any kind of real consequence or accountability.
No, they actually reaped the rewards of the bailout.
Right. And at every turn, and I, again, am stealing Mike's thunder here, just to be very clear, and you should read his piece when it comes out. At every turn, what we're told, and this is happening now, I'll bring us into the present day. So, your Substack is called Freedom Over Fascism. I assume not coincidentally, like that is a phrase that I use frequently.
You used it on my, I first heard it from you on my podcast, and I then stole it. So hopefully you're not
There's
upset
no
with me.
stealing. As I like to say constantly, if your words don't spread, they don't work. So whenever people are like, can we say this? I'm like, I'm literally like paid to put words in people's mouths. I don't know what else to tell you. You couldn't possibly steal a thing that I'm desperately trying to get people to repeat. So there's no stealing. So the willingness to call what's happening, the willingness to say back in the day that this is an authoritarian regime, or that this is a fascist threat, or that this is a fascist power grab. The willingness, as you probably know, the episode, in the first round of the continuing resolution fight, where I was loudly screaming, it's a MAGA murder budget, and then a MAGA murder bill, MAGA murder bill, MAGA murder bill. And in fact, right now, the reality of what happened to Renee Nicole Good, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around, I have not had a lot of sleep, is that she was murdered by MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
And in place after place and time after time, both here and, most recently in Venezuela and in other places, people are continuously being murdered by MAGA, both quite literally point blank shot range, but also passively through the inability to get care when we are ill, the inability to access food through food stamps when, that was the way they were getting their jollies, the inability for kids to be able to access care, and on and on and on. This is a death cult. And all along the way, we are always told that we are being hyperbolic, we are exaggerating, or that even if what we are saying is true and people are willing to credit it as true, it's unseemly to say it. Because apparently the way out of this mess is to be more polite. Apparently the way out of this mess is to woo back in order to have the quote unquote very big tent that we require to get out of this fascist threat, which somehow is going to happen by us never admitting what's actually occurring and simply confining ourselves, I guess, to talk about egg prices or prices more broadly, to be fair. And so the reason why we are not at the ready in the same way as the right is because we're often told, admonished, that we shouldn't be narrating the truth of what's occurring. We shouldn't be making the demands that are commensurate to actually what's going on, which of course is impeachment and removal, which of course is to remove the regime. Like there is no other demand that is commensurate. And so we couldn't possibly be at the ready because we have been conditioned and told that the right way to respond is to bite our tongue.
Right. One of the things that I've been offering out is that we start and continue to call them the MAGA murder machine or the MAGA murder regime, because, as you said, it's a death cult. And I think one of the things that's frustrating to hear, to those of us here in activist land, is that exactly what you said, that the people who are supposed to be our leaders are acting as if being more polite, playing the game that is that they purport is to be still the old game, which it isn't. So a lot of the conversation out here today is, okay, we're ready, but where are our leaders? You know, it's like, I'm your leader, I must follow you. So it's frustrating. And yet there's got to be a way to lead the leaders to get to where we need to be. And articles of impeachment were filed today against Noam. So there's that.
So, what I would say is that the most literal definition of a leader is a person who goes first. And so, whoever goes first is the leader. And obviously, that's a big old statement because people could go first into like stupidity and malice and idiocy. And I don't mean that. I mean, people could also be an evil, terrible leader, right? So we mean a specific kind of thing with leader. We don't just mean like people who are wandering us off of a cliff to our own peril. We have leaders like that. In fact, they run the regime. So I think what I have seen and observed is that, when some of us were saying fascist power grab and some of us were willing to say MAGA murder bill or MAGA murder budget initially, and some of us were willing to really tell the truth about what's occurring, yes, we were told it's unseemly. But for example, just to take some concrete for instances, early on in 2025, we gave the advice that unless something is actually illegal with due process, quote unquote, deportation, which has a legal meaning, like ask an immigration lawyer, deportation is an actual thing that is bounded and has like a procedure, then we need to be calling these abductions and kidnappings. And when I was first saying that, people were like, oh, horror, no, deportation, deportation, deportation. And then the horrific capture of Mahmoud Khalil in New York City, the Columbia University student who was taken, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to Texas. Please feel free to correct me. And therefore, deportation wasn't top of people's minds because he was not deported. He was not taken across a port. And people use the language of abduction, pardon me. And I think for many reasons, but that is one of them, that case rightly got a lot of interest and attention. The same thing with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who, of course, we know famously was abducted and he was removed to a different port. He was abducted, as we all know, to the El Salvadorian concentration camp in Sikot. And the same goes with the word regime. We've been telling people not to call them an administration and not to call them a government for a very long time. And slowly, 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 now regime appears, for example, not on the New York Times, not in the news site, but they let people use it in op-eds. And maybe I'm, comforting myself with very, very small linguistic victories. And maybe that's all I got. Feel free to tell me that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of aware. But it takes a lot to get people to shake out of their habituated patterns. It takes a lot to shake people into, no, this is really what's going on. And pretending it's not what's going on or kind of couching it in euphemism is not going to endear anyone to you because it is not going to catalyze the response we require. And that's really where I think a lot of this misunderstanding lives. It's the idea that the purpose of what we say is to increase surveyed responses of agree, disagree, when in fact, the purpose of what we say is to activate and sustain a much larger set of people who are not merely resisting, but actually defying. Because what we know, back to your leader question, is that for good and for ill and for all of it, you're the leader. You listening, you, Stephanie, you, me. If you're willing to go first, if you're willing to say that this is a murder by MAGA, if you're willing to call out what's actually going on here, not because everyone's instantly going to agree with you, I promise you they won't, but because that is what allows other people to come out and say that. That is what forces the kind of mainstream, more institutional elements of our society, whether that be mainstream media or whether that be the business community and so on, to start also breaking away. We have to go first. Otherwise, no one's going to follow. And I think that that is where the quote unquote elected leaders, some of whom don't need have already gone first, and we do need to acknowledge and laud and praise the folks who are being clear and are articulating what's going on. But for the rest of them to come along, they have to feel a strength in numbers around it. They aren't actually leaders in the sense that we need them to be. They are representatives, and they're basically putting their finger in the pulse of whatever they think the wind is. And so what we have to do is demonstrate that this is actually what most people not only believe, but are willing to say.
Yeah, out here, I have a super secret source inside the Beltway who last month said, I have an idea for an op-ed. You should do an op-ed for the New York Times and call this the regime. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, been doing that for,
a year. Yeah, a year.
But, and he's not in office, but is proximate. And the thought that there is such a different sense of what reality is. I mean, we know we have a different reality from MAGA. We've been over that. We're creating this. I'm sorry about the light, guys. It's mid-afternoon.
It's sort of touched by an angel. It's fitting.
Yeah. So we're out here trying to create an independent media where we're essentially talking to the choir, and we're elevating voices, and we're amplifying each other. And yet it seems like, and to be fair, there are some states where the leaders inside the states are doing great work.
Yeah.
But the federal level, it's like they're in a totally different reality. And that was the first place that the feds went. And I was listening to Ezra Levin on Wajahat Ali's show earlier today, and he basically said we need to tell our leaders where to go, and they'll follow. And like you are, and I guess that's just really frustrating. But it's not just this murder. It's all of the same piece. There's the question of, is something distracting from something else? But I believe it's all the same corruption and murder and desire for power and corruption and greed. So how to make it clear that this thing where something big happens every single day. Thank you, Steve Bannon, is actually part and parcel of itself, the whole thing.
Yeah. So first of all, this seems like a tiny little facile thing, but we pretty often, if not always in our messaging, I wouldn't use this phrase right now with the Renee Good thing because it feels too like dismissive, but in other cases, for example, when Trump announces that he's going to increase the military budget from 1 trillion to 1.5 trillion, the phrase "there they go again."
Right.
This is here they are doing the exact same thing. Here they are like literally just saying "there they go again." Here they go again.
Yeah.
This is them again, proving to us that this MAGA regime of the bullies for the billionaires is destroying our lives. Like, just whatever the new piece of evidence is, whatever the social post or whatever the declaration or whatever the horrific atrocity, once again, this MAGA regime of the bullies for the billionaires is destroying our lives. Like, anytime a thing happens, that is what's happening. Details to follow.
Right.
And really centering and focusing in on how they are hell-bent on taking our freedoms, destroying our families, and undoing our futures. And that's it, just having a repeated refrain. Our repeated refrain is regimes of the bullies for the billionaires in order to make that economic tieback, which is both very, very true and absolutely essential. And then on the other end of it, speaking to the agency and giving people a sense of purpose and power. Because, of course, what we know equally well is that the ultimate aim of any authoritarian regime is to erode our will to resist in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Is, you referenced Steve Bannon, to keep coming at us in every possible way so that we feel so despondent, so despairing, so horrified, so terrified, or just so what the fuck are we supposed to do, that we stop trying. That's really the win they're looking for, because otherwise they have to keep fighting with us, and that's exhausting to them. So we also, in our messaging, need to do the other end of things, not just call out precisely what this is in roughly the exact same language every single time, so that we have an inkling of hope that maybe it will be heard the first time. I'm going to do a little parentheses. You shared that story about regime. I swear I'm not making this up. Monday, as in a few days ago, I was on a call with, really, really important, prominent folks in sort of the legal establishment who have been, credit to them, suing and suing and suing and suing and suing. And thank goodness. And we were talking through how to talk about Venezuela. And one of them said to me, like, "Oh, I noticed it says regime here. Is that what we're supposed to be saying?" And I was just like,
Well, have we learned nothing?
Like these are folks who, like, are doing incredible work, and like I talk to quite frequently. And I'm like, wait, you've never noticed that we've been giving that advice for a solid year here? And so, why is it that like they noticed? I don't know. I can't tell you why, but like that's what happened, even though we've been very, very consistent about that advice. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. So the other part of the message is, but as ever, the many can take on the money. And as we have proven time and time again, and will prove now, we will remove this regime. We will make this a place where every single one of us can come home to our loved ones at night, safe and secure in the knowledge that we can care for our families. Basically, it also has to end with the other side of like, the only way we're going to get out of this is for us to resist and refuse and ridicule. And we have to remind people of that as well.
Well, you're talking to a community here who are all in. But I'm sure most of us have, sorry, I have to close this curtain. It's driving me insane. Okay, there we go. Um, most of us know people who are either in the MAGA world, which thankfully I don't, or who are just so conditioned to be in the polite world that they're frozen uh, and don't even think that there's a possibility. And they're like, oh, the midterms are going to save us. The midterms are going to save us.
Yeah.
And clearly we need more than that. And clearly it's not just this federal power majority in Congress that's doing this. So do you have any thoughts for people who are talking, well, among ourselves, we're good on repeating the messages that we what we want to build and what we are trying to achieve. Where I heard you say free America, and I'm completely on board with that. But
And
how do we talk about it?
Yeah.
To people who are paralyzed or, still thinking we're in the same world that we used to be.
Yeah. So as far as people who are in the midterms are going to save us, what I often say to people is we can't vote our way to democracy. If that was going to have worked, it would have worked when we delivered a shellacking to MAGA in 2018 in the midterms, and when we got Trump out of office in 2020, and when we, staved off the worst of the red wave, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, they did win the House because of the abysmal performance of mostly New York, but also California, which is where I live, Democratic parties, respectively. So first, just being like, if that was going to have worked, it would have worked. And I mean, that's just like people know. I mean, once you point out to them that like, we did try that, it didn't in fact stop the fascism, that tends to sort of be like, oh yeah, I guess we did try to vote our way out of this, and like that we did not pull that off. And again, why didn't we pull that off? It's because of the same thing we spoke about earlier, that even with, granted, a very small trifecta in the 2020, from 2020 to 2022, Democrats were largely sort of self-restrained on the altar of the filibuster and unwilling to, quote, violate institutional norms in service of doing things like passing the Freedom to Vote Act and actually dealing with a lot of what is going to make, ironically, these midterms actually extraordinarily difficult and not merely a matter of getting 50% plus one. So first of all, there's just the fact that like, we know we can't vote our way to democracy, because if that was going to have worked, it would have worked, and it didn't. And I want to be clear here, voting is extraordinarily important, and the midterms are extraordinarily important, and electing more Democrats is extraordinarily important. I am not meaning to claim anything different. But what we have is an economic problem that masquerades as a purely political problem. And unless and until people fully understand, not just understand, because to perhaps, I don't know if this is surprising, we're in focus groups every other week, like have been since 2020, all the time. And I have been heartened to the extent to which kind of everyday Americans who are kind of across the board, very low information, very little political engagement. That is just sort of the average person. That is how they are, often for very, very good reasons having to do with economic precarity and just like the difficulty of getting through a day. So I don't say that with any kind of condemnation. I just say it as like, that's what's going on. That's who people are for the most part, which I think is hard for us to understand because we are so uber politically engaged, and probably the people we talk to are. that like you don't believe me that that's true, but like I don't know what to tell you if you're not watching focus group. Most people have no, like most of what is going on, they have no idea. They have no idea. So basically, I have been surprised the extent to which people can draw the economic and political connection. And the way that that sounds out of sort of focus group mouths, and I'm paraphrasing lots of people amalgamating, is yeah, well, you know, Trump's old, like he'll die eventually or he'll go away eventually, but like that doesn't mean this thing goes away because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the corporations and the billionaires who are running everything and they'll just get themselves a different person who will do whatever they want. Like people know it. People know that who's actually running this show is on Sand Hill Road, which is where all the venture capitalists are in Silicon Valley, not at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Right.
And that notwithstanding how absolutely terrifying and horrific and dangerous Trump is and all of the people that serve him and his regime, you know, the people calling the shots are the people who have all the money and for some reason want even more of it. And yes, I know that Trump is a billionaire and so are lots of people in his cabinet, so they're included. But we have to actually confront the problem to the depths that it exists and to the reality that it exists. Otherwise, we're going to keep narrowly what I would call not losing elections at best.
Right.
And it's important that we not lose elections, meaning that we eke over a Democratic majority in whatever freaking way possible and as large a majority as possible and in as many places as possible. But unless and until we actually have true representation that is not filtered through the desires and wishes and whims of a very, very tiny elite donor class, we're basically fucked. And that's why when we're talking about sort of what do people need to do, blah, 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 the economic elements of the resistance, refusal, and ridicule. So the Tesla takedown, the Target boycott, the, you know, Disney boycott, the attempted boycott over, you know, the post-Thanksgiving holiday shopping season. Like there just has to be of Home Depot and Amazon and forgive me what I'm forgetting.
Spotify.
Thank you. You know, today is supposed to be a day that we're not getting gas. Like we have no business being anywhere near at the very minimum Chevron. Like I understand for lots of people for economic reasons and for logistical reasons, like you have to fill up your tank. You have to. You're a first responder, you're a parent who has to go pick up their child. Like I do get it. At least like let's go nowhere near Chevron, which has basically declared itself the owner of like Venezuelan crude oil and has been given, if I'm not mistaken from the reporting, carte blanche to exploit and take whatever it is they want from a separate sovereign nation. So we have to withhold our labor. We have to withhold our dollars because that is the loudest thing that we can do. And, you know, I don't know if this sounds like comforting or horrifying, but I'm a person who believes that this thing really doesn't get taken care of without a significant general strike.
Right. And I think that that's not the American culture. There's lots of cultures where, or countries that are significantly smaller where strikes by the entire population is something that they have done and do. But I think that it's going to be really hard to do that in this, you know, vast land where so many people don't really understand what's going on. I mean, there's supposed to be a walkout next week on the
20th.
20th.
The
right?
Free America walkout that Women's March has called, and other folks are kind of climbing on board. Free Speech for the People, I saw, who's been an unrelenting voice for on impeachment, and you want to talk about going first, very much going first on that demand. They're kind of getting on board with that and turning it into a free America with the impeachment demand. I think others, 5051 is also on board with that walkout. Obviously, in the interim, a lot of vigils and a lot of solidarity vigils for what happened yesterday in Minneapolis and for Renee and so on. Yeah.
So all of this is domestic.
Yeah.
Well, it's all connected, we know, but it seems that, well, we invaded Venezuela and we're about to invade Greenland and maybe Mexico and maybe Canada. And so how do we maybe even just wrap our minds around the complete shift that this regime wants to make of the entire world order? Blowing up NATO and taking us from being the leader of the entire country to being a leader in the Western Hemisphere. How do we help people wrap their minds around that and understand it's the same thing? It's the oil in Venezuela, and they think they're going to get AI and those massive ice sheets in Greenland, and that it's power and money and power and money and money and power, and not separate problems.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we urge people to say this MAGA regime of the bullies for the billionaires is hell-bent on destroying our lives. And every action they take is toward that purpose. Every action they take is toward grabbing more money and power, whether that be unleashing masked militia, ICE and DHS, excuse me, against our communities, abducting family members and literally murdering people, or it's invading foreign nations in the pursuit of delivering more money to their billionaire backers. This MAGA regime is hell-bent on destroying our lives. Lives here, lives abroad. Nothing is too much for them as long as it enriches them and increases their power. Like it's pretty simple. I mean, and it needs to be simple because it needs to be a clear, coherent, repeated refrain. And the second sentence still has to be, but the many have always defeated the money. And standing in solidarity, we can demand the removal of this regime and make America a place where liberty and justice isn't merely a promise, it's actually delivered for all, no asterisks. Like, it has to include the second part, which is a call that we make it different. Otherwise, what it is just a recitation. And it's important to have a clear recitation of exactly what this is. And that recitation needs to be pretty much the same every time.
Right. So that call to action, the say what you're for piece is super important. In the chat, if anyone has any questions, put them in and I'll read it out. But how, I know you've worked in a lot of other countries.
Yeah.
What can we learn from what people in other countries have done if they've been successful?
Yeah. I mean, the difficult thing to say with few exceptions, and I'll give the exceptions, is that in other countries, and not just in other countries, in our own history, like, it's not quick. Getting out of this kind of thing doesn't happen on like a 2-year election cycle. And I think that that's where a lot of us understandably are like, well, but I went to 2 protests. Like, I mean, let me be flippant for a moment, because flippant is my like standard form of communication. Like I ordered a Revolution on Amazon Prime. Like, where is it? And
Right.
like I'll shock you to hear that Jeff Bezos isn't going to deliver you the usurpation of the ruling class. Like, you can't get that. You're supposed to be able to get anything on Amazon, but it turns out you cannot actually have liberty and justice delivered via Amazon. It's very, very annoying. And in fact, Amazon is created for the exact opposite. So partly we have to understand that like it takes a lot to get out of this business if we're truly exiting the full gamut of it, not merely winning the midterms, which we need to do. And I know I keep repeating that, but I don't want to be told back that I said the midterms don't fucking matter, because I did not say that.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think we're looking at like a 50, like we need the 50-year plan. They plan in
let's say 10.
10.
So
Okay, fine.
but so that's just like a thing to know. And then, to the more precise question. So, what has happened in places where there has been what, scholars of authoritarianism like to call a U-turn, right? I mean, they use very polite language like democratic erosion, which, I'm not a big fan of polite language, as you may have noticed. But they are experts who study this, and so it's worthwhile to understand what they're telling us. That basically what has happened in those places, if I can is that enough people, and enough people isn't 50% of people, it's less than 5% of people, at least historically that's been the case, have withheld their consent, have become ungovernable in a non-violent way, I want to underscore. But that means getting enough defectors, there was the brave woman from the National Guard, I want to say from Texas, who basically was like, I'm not going to follow these orders. There is the former Hilton franchisee, who of course then, Hilton as a corporation went back on it, but who as an independent business owner, hotel owner, was like, no, you can't stay here.
Right.
The more of that happens, the more of that happens. And that is actually the way that this whole thing crumbles, because as evil and as horrific and as well armed as they are, there's not enough of them within the regime. And even with their diehard, 20%, 30% supporters, they can't keep going unless people keep letting them go. And so basically the way out of it historically has been, what Maria Stephan and Erica Chenoweth talk about, which is eroding the pillars of support. And those pillars are, the law community, the university community, the business community, the civil society, the media and arts. When, for example, I'm sure you all saw, artists are like, I'm not performing at the artist formerly known as the Kennedy Center, I'm not going to do it. Like, that may feel symbolic, but that isn't just symbolic. It's actually really, really important, because what they're doing is, first of all, publicizing that to potentially newer audiences who maybe weren't paying attention but do like music or do like dance or do like theater or whatever. But also they're withdrawing consent. And so the name of the game, because believe it or not, and I mean, it's uncomfortable to say this, it's uncomfortable for me, like, we're tacitly consenting to all of this.
Right.
When we just like sort of go about our lives and our days, we are tacitly consenting to this. And when governors of states, especially those who are, supposedly speaking out more, don't use every tool in their toolbox, including withholding money and refusing to send it to the federal government, holding it, as far as I can understand, in escrow accounts, I mean, that's what it has required in other places, is large, sustained protest movements, which are visible and out in the world, which then makes other people do it. And then just withholding consent. So, famously, of course, the Montgomery bus boycott, you don't get on the bus.
Right.
And it's very hard. And it requires an extraordinary amount in that situation of hardship, because in that case, you belong to a community where very few people have private transportation and where you live far away from where you need to go in order to earn a living. And you somehow organize your way into pulling that off anyway. If in that case, as a microcosm, the bus system is treating you in ways that are absolutely wrong and inhumane and incorrect and racist and all of the rest of it, then you withdraw your consent. You do not ride. And so the question really is, like, what is our do not ride?
Right.
And I think, it's a do not shop, do not attend, do not go gently into that good night, like, do not temper your speech.
Right.
And yeah.
Create friction whenever possible, I think.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you, just to round out, we're at time, like some
Yeah.
concrete examples. So in France, as you all know, a couple of years ago, there was a snap election after Macron's party was kind of soundly defeated in the EU elections. He, God knows why, decided to call elections, national elections in France with basically no notice. I think it was 2 weeks from that announcement. It might have been 3. I don't remember. Very few, less than a month, from the call to the first round of elections. And so the NPF, the New Popular Front translation, made a really important decision to kind of reassemble and to be like, we're going to basically have a slate and we're going to get folks to vote either for folks, the different parties within our coalition, but also when need be for Macron's party. And, so much animosity. Like, we're not talking about people who are hunky dory with each other. We are talking about like far left parties and kind of neoliberal center left, lots of anger and displeasure among the various voters in these two camps. And so we came up with an encapsulating idea in no time, 0 time. And that encapsulating idea was, it's better to fight among friends than to face fascism alone, which got reduced into the slogan, let's argue later. And basically, this was like, here's what we're going to do. Like, if the person you have to vote for is far left, then that's what you're doing. If the person you have to vote for is center left, like, that's what you're doing. Basically, anyone but the Grim Reaper and her henchmen, right? Like,
Right.
You might not love it and you're doing it anyway. And, that's a particular case because there was an election, like, it's a particular situation. But spread that very simple, let's argue later, or it's better to fight among friends than to face fascism alone message through every popular means, through TikTok, through the French soccer team changing their jerseys and doing social proof by saying, I vote, I believe it was the 7th, and having that number be, in lieu of what their player number would have been. I can give examples from Brazil. I can give examples from the Philippines, from other places. But what it really boils down to is the creativity of ordinary people. And ironically, because in those contexts, there isn't this like awash money in politics that filters down to all levels, including the presence of lots and lots of incredible kind of professional organizations that do politics for a living. Those don't exist to the degree that they do in Brazil or in the Philippines or on the African continent, and even within Western Europe, even within the UK. I mean, there's no comparison to the money in politics here. And so it actually just kind of is everyday people being creative because they're not waiting for a national organization, because there are far, far fewer of those. And in some ways, I know this sounds weird, but I kind of envy them.
Well, the lack of the kind of money that we're looking at in politics is
Yes.
crucial. So we are approaching the top of the hour, and I want, I used to go to your briefings before the election all the time. How can people find you so that they can keep track of all the good things and important things that you're saying?
Well, you can follow me on Substack, Words to Win By. Um, you can follow me on Blue Sky at Anatosaurus, is the handle that I use. You can listen to the old episodes that are available of my podcast, which is also called Words to Win By, in the old-fashioned non-video, just podcast.
Just listen. Yeah.
Listen, if you would like a shot of hope in the darkness, almost every episode is about a campaign we won somewhere in the world, and how we did it.
Which I think is super, super important. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sorry it was confusing at the beginning. It always manages to be confusing at the beginning. And to all 220 of you, which is pretty good for me, I would like you can follow us both at the top of your screen, and boycott Spotify, and subscribe, either paid or free if you can. All of my content is free.
And avoid Chevron.
Avoid Chevron with the list at some point.
Avoid all the things.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anat, for coming on and talking to us on a not such a great day.
Yeah.